Hello everybody, this is Concrete Play, and today we're going to talk about level planning, aka tutorials. Now, if you look on the internet, there is a lot of really good content about how to build your levels. And you can find a lot of those details everywhere on the internet. There are at least 10 people who do really good tutorials on that topic alone, and I really recommend you give them a look. But we're not talking about level design. We're talking about level planning. What's the difference? Well, level planning is how your levels lure the player into the depths of your game's systems and the depths of your game's content. So let's go ahead and talk about how you would normally think of all of the levels you want to put in your game and how you would normally arrange them and how you would normally, you want to do this, you want to do that. How do you go through the level? How do you go through the world? What do you do next? Well, if you've played a lot of RPGs, well, you already know that you have a pretty strong set of iconic images. You've got the fire volcano, and you've got the icelands, and then you've got the big city, and then you've got like the village, and then you've got like ruins, and then you've got forests, and then you've got all that stuff, right? You've got all this iconic imagery, and you're going to come up with levels that are based on those most of the time. Most people will design their fictional design for their RPG when they're just starting out and they're just starting to jot it down. They'll be like, okay, I can do an ice level. That sounds cool. I can do a volcano level. Look at this. I found this cool tile set for volcanoes. I can do a ruins level. They come out with these exact same ideas. That's not because they're uncreative. That's because these are really strong, iconic images. And I can't say that that's bad. I can say that that's not level planning. Now let's talk about your average first-person shooter. If you're creating yourself a first-person shooter game and you're like, well, what am I going to put in my first-person shooter? What levels am I going to have for my walking fridge? And then you do the exact same sort of thinking. You're like, okay, well, I've got an office building, and I've got hell, and I've got sewers, and I've got a factory, and I've got a biolab, and I've got all that stuff, right? You can come up with stuff day and night, iconic images, strong things. The players can really grab onto these ideas. They walk into a biolab and they say, oh, this is going to be cool. Sure, it's trite, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. You can put your own spin on these iconic images if you'd like. Coming up with new iconic images is sometimes quite difficult, and I don't really worry about it too much if I'm just starting out. If you can't think of a level that has never been done before, that's fine. All you have to do is actually plan your levels properly. What does that mean? Well, let me ask you a simple question. Which of these levels comes first? Which out of all of these levels happens first? Well, in an RPG, it's always the village, and in a first-person shooter, it's always the office. Why is that? Because those have no threats. You can introduce the player to the basics of your game's mechanics. You can say, okay, this is how you move, this is how you open chests, this is how you crawl through air vents, this is how you aim your gun, this is how you fight off a wolf, this is how you equip things, this is how you sell things, this is how you get side quests, this is how you hack doors. In a very safe environment, you can give the player all the time they need to discover these without having to worry about repercussions if they suck at it. Good examples of this, Deus Ex. Deus Ex almost always starts in an office, and then you run around and you learn all of the play mechanics. Now, you can call this kind of a tutorial village or a tutorial office space. It's like, it's all about learning stuff, but this isn't a place where it's like, you can open chests by pressing A. Press A to continue. You can find stuff in chests. Press A to continue. It's not pulling you out of the game world to explain how to do something. Instead, it's letting you stay in the game world, and if you stumble across something, it might pop up some kind of context hint, but it's not going to interrupt you. Well, if you're wandering around in Deus Ex and you walk up to a vent, you're going to get a little context hint. press A to open the vent. But it's not going to be like, you can open vents to go through them. Press A to continue. You should go through this vent. Press A to continue. Please notice that you cannot turn around while you're in a vent. Press A to continue. They don't do that. They don't need to because they've planned their level out properly. Now, planning out your tutorial level, obviously a challenge, but there's a lot of information on how to do that. There's a lot of information, but it usually gets ignored. 99% of all games have terrible tutorial levels. A really great example of an awful tutorial level, Skyrim, with its 2-hour-long shit tutorial. Final Fantasy XIV, was it? I can't remember anymore. The last one that I played, which had a 13-hour-long tutorial. That was great. That's not how you do your tutorial levels. In fact, there's something to be said for the fact that the tutorial level isn't actually the tutorial level. What do I mean? What comes next? What comes after the village? What comes after the office? Usually, it's just something a little bit threatening. Why? Because as you wander into the forest, or as you wander into the factory, or whatever it is, you can encounter some of the combat mechanics, and some of the threat mechanics, and some of the recovery mechanics in a position that's still fairly safe. You don't have to say, you will run out of ammo. Press A to continue. Please pick up this ammo box. Press A to continue. You just encounter those things over the course of the level. And that's the nature of this whole idea. Your game is this tangled blob of potential. You've got all sorts of systems, and in your head, you can see how these systems are going to unfold, and you've got all this content built into these systems. You're like, okay, I've got this cool idea for a magic system based around killing monsters and then harvesting their souls, and then you can like summon the monster or become the monster. Yeah, you can shapeshift into the monster, maybe partially shapeshift. Oh, but what if it's like a multi-part monster, and you have one soul and your party member has another soul, and you both transform and you like switch into it like Voltron? And what happens if you lose control and the monsters take over your body and you can't fight them off? What happens if you merge two monster souls together? You can do this all day, and you can come up with these really cool ideas on how this game works. You can come up with these cool mechanics and this cool content. You can just immediately start talking about content. If you can lose your humanity to a monster that you've summoned, then that is a lot of content right there. There's a lot of people who have lost their humanity to monsters, and some of the bosses are going to be monsters in the flesh of a human. And maybe they'll look human, but they'll actually like have the souls of the monsters that have taken over their bodies. So you'll have like this totally normal looking dude, but he's actually got all of the same powers as the slavering monster beast from beyond the 12 seas, or a cute dog, whatever. And because of this, you have a lot of really cool content. You can build a lot of really cool characters around that, a lot of really cool levels and plot events. At the same time, you have to introduce the concept of losing yourself to a monster before you hit that level. That's a level plan. So this level comes after the level where you actually teach about that. And that is the basic idea. The basic idea is that this tangled web of content and possibility, you unroll it. You unroll it and you lay it kind of flat, and you let the player walk across it. Dum-de-dum-de-dum. This is cool. And you introduce them to all the cool shit in your game world, both content and also the mechanics. The two should be very, very familiar with each other. They should be each should have something to say to the other side, but it's important that you unroll it, you flatten it down a little bit, because the player isn't going to know what to do with this. They're just going to bounce off of it. They're like, I can't get in. What the heck is this thing? And they're going to stop playing your game. Now, if you spread it too thin, you're going to be really obnoxious. But that's not usually a problem for indie devs. Normally, the problem is that they have a hard time unrolling it at all. So it's like this big ball, and then it's flat. It's like, oh, great. So even if I do figure out your systems, there's nothing else in the game. But if you unroll it, you're like, oh, this is a cool idea. Oh, this is another cool idea. Oh, look, there's a cool idea over here. Oh, man, it's the end of the game, and there's still cool ideas coming out. Awesome. and you just feel happy the whole way through. This is how you do your level planning. You come up with all of the cool stuff that your mechanics and your content allow, and you figure out which order you need to display it in. Now, this might seem a little bit odd to some people because they might be like, you know what? I want to have a story about this particular princess girl who rebels against her father and goes on a quest and, fights the evil warlock dude and marries someone and all that stuff. And I have this story in mind. I have this beautiful, beautiful story, and nope, don't do that. Instead, think, I have this princess, and she has this special power. I need to introduce this power to the player, but it also has these ramifications later on, so I need to make sure that I introduce those ramifications as well, and then you can start to build these huge chunks of level. And you're like, okay, well, in the second level, I'll introduce the princess's special time warp power. And then in the fourth level, I'll introduce the princess's the future problems that'll cause by showing you the queen self-destructing paradox self-destruct, and you'll have to live with that. And then suddenly you're like, well, what do I put in these levels? What do I put in these levels? The content starts to suggest itself. Look at this. The queen is just self-destructed right here in the story, so we can fill this time. This part here is the princess after the queen has self-destructed. How does she react? Who is coming after her? Are the people of the land looking for her to try and maybe take her queen's position, or are they trying to kill her so that the corrupt bloodline does not continue? Or now you have a compelling set of a compelling progression, a compelling set of levels. That is how I think of level planning in tutorials. And one of the things you'll notice is that the very first level, the tutorial level, does not teach about the time warp. It does not teach about the paradox. It does not teach you that you need to worry about whether or not you're wearing foreign clothes in this foreign land. It doesn't do any of that. The tutorial level, quote unquote, just lets you get comfortable with the characters and the setting and the controls if there's anything wonky with them. This is also a tutorial level. This is also a tutorial level. This is also a tutorial level. Maybe not a mechanical one. Maybe it's teaching you about how people perceive the princess. Maybe it's teaching you about what factions exist. And while you're doing that, you can wrangle all of this really, really interesting content out of it. And at this point, you can go, okay, well, now I have to introduce the challenge, and then introduce a slightly different challenge, and then a more difficult version of the challenge, and a safe version of the challenge, and then you can start to actually design your levels. Anyway, I hope that's clear, because I have seen way too many indie devs that just do not plan their levels out, and they just throw all of their content and all of their mechanics into a giant mess right up front, and they're like, yeah, eat this, and everyone's like, no, that looks terrible. So please, plan your levels.